hello there.
Hello.
Friends, lovers, it's Wednesday night. This is 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. What is going on?
Well, I'm sure it's a Sunday in another universe or dimension.
Yes, it's Sunday in a different time zone on a different planet. Welcome. Welcome to 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir on Wednesday night and simulcast with the Clubhouse version of this show, Life on Earth. And we are so glad you are here. Thank you for coming. Hello, friends and lovers. Thank you for joining us on the first ever simulcast.
Wow. Double cast?
Doublecast. That's right. Like an old double mint chewing gum commercial, except we're not twins.
Double your pleasure, double
Double your
fun.
pleasure, double your fun. That's right. Mm-hmm. So welcome to the 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir podcast with me and my co-host Amy Nasir.
Hello.
And welcome to the first ever Clubhouse Simulcast, our Clubhouse show Life on Earth, which is an open conversation every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Here, I'll read the official script. Our Clubhouse show, Life on Earth, is a 1-hour conversation with you. See, on Clubhouse, you can talk to us.
Yes.
I know you're like on the chat and you're typing, and that's cool, and we love when you do that. But if you have an Apple device that can run the Clubhouse app, you can talk back too. Mm-hmm. That's cool. Anyway, conversation with you from the perspective of the philosophy of Ayn Rand and the philosophy of me and the philosophy of you.
And the philosophy of Amy Nasir.
Including why the fact that values are primary and objectivism is a philosophy for living on Earth means that objectivists can and should be the most benevolent, optimistic, cheerful, hopeful, gracious, positive people on Earth. This is Life on Earth. Mm-hmm. So, tonight, we'd like to talk about control. What, in any given moment, you've got control over, including your focus, your attitude, and your gratitude. Mm-hmm. I usually say appreciation because attitude rhymes with gratitude and, so overdone. But we're going to talk about that. If you are conscious of your control and its limitations, if you've got a real sense of what you can control directly, if you've got tips for maximizing your willpower, your self-control, your focus, and what you can do with it, tell us about it. Let's talk. Let's go back to the 5 minute style here. Today is Wednesday, April 7th, 2021, the 97th day of the year, your best year ever, 2021. There are 268 days left to make this your best year yet. Mm-hmm. 74 days until summer. In the northern hemisphere, anyway. In the southern hemisphere, I'm sure they're thinking, yeah, 74 days until winter. 261 days until Christmas. I think that one probably applies around the world. And today, I looked in this day in history, as I always do. This day in history, I don't know. It was one of those days when you don't want to know what happened. But going to national holidays, now we get to the good stuff.
Yes, the human history says TMI.
Too much information.
You don't want to know.
Damn straight. But today is National Beer Day, so I'm going to pull up a Heineken here because it's what I've got, and it's cold. Mm. If Amy was drinking tonight, she'd be going for the Guinness.
I would be, but I am not drinking tonight.
We do have the dark draft in the fridge still from St. Patrick's Day. But yeah, I guess it's not a drinking night for Amy.
So I have to man the chats here. Come on over and chat with me.
The irony is that I'm not a drinker.
You're not.
No, Amy is much more likely to have a drink in her hand than I am. But
yes,
that's okay. If you're not drinking tonight, I will cover that for you. So cheers to everybody out there. It is National Beer Day, celebrated in the United States every year on April 7th, marking the day that the Cullen-Harrison Act was enacted after having been signed into law by President Franklin Roosevelt on March 22, 1933, which led to the 18th Amendment being repealed on December 5, 1933, with the ratification of the 21st Amendment. We talked about this once before. They can't actually repeal an amendment. What they have to do is pass another amendment that announces it's repealing the previous amendment. This is how the U.S. Constitution works. That repeal ratification on April 6th, the day prior to National Beer Day, is known as New Beer's Eve. Seriously, I'm not kidding. Upon signing the legislation, Roosevelt made his famous remark, quote, "I think this would be a good time for a beer." Maybe one of the only things I agreed with Roosevelt on. The law went into effect April 7th that year in states that had enacted their own law allowing such sales. The beer could contain up to 3.2% alcohol by weight, or 4.05 by volume, compared to the 0.5% limit that the Volstead Act had. Because 3.2% was considered too low to produce intoxication. Now that's a percentage, so if 3.2 isn't enough, you just drink twice as much, and you've got 6.4, right? Anyway, people across the country responded by gathering outside breweries, some beginning the night before. On that first day, 1.5 million barrels of beer were consumed, inspiring the future holiday. Today, April 7th, is recognized as National Beer Day. So
wait, how many bottles of beer are on the wall?
we start with 99, and the question is always how many can we get down to before we are too drunk to finish the song. So, happy National Beer Day. It's also a happy birthday to Francis Ford Coppola. Born 82 years ago today in Detroit, Michigan. I'm not a big Francis Ford Coppola fan. I haven't even finished watching all the Godfather films, but he's a Detroit native.
I did not know this.
So he's well connected. You know, he's the father of Sofia Coppola, who is now more famous among the younger set than her father, as both an actress and a director. And he's the uncle of Jason Schwartzman and Nicolas Cage. So happy birthday, Francis Ford Coppola. It's also the birthday of the late Ravi Shankar.
Oh, yes.
Yes. We lost him in 2012.
We got to see him in Ann Arbor play a really nice show, and it was really amazing.
We did. We got to see Ravi Shankar not long before he passed away. Great show. One of my favorite things that Ravi Shankar did is he wrote the orchestral music that was played at the tribute to George Harrison.
Yes.
In fact, his daughter directed the music that he wrote, and then afterward played sitar, which was also his instrument of choice, on the two pieces they played after that and before the rock and roll part of the concert. I've recommended my favorite live rock and roll concert of all time, which is Stop Making Sense by Talking Heads. Incidentally,
yes,
the name of the band is Talking Heads. They released an album called, the name of the band, this band is Talking Heads.
Just to be clear.
And yet people still call them the Talking Heads. The funny thing is, one of the reasons I started a podcast was to spread to the world, far and wide, how do you pronounce Nasir?
Nasir.
The way you pronounce Nasir is Nasir.
Nasir.
Yes.
Nasir.
So I understand the idea of releasing a whole record album called The Name of This Band is Talking Heads, just to try to get people to get it right. And I've had about as much success with that as they did with that.
The name of my name is Robert Nasir.
So this is 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. It's also Life on Earth on Radio Ragnar. Although I'm looking, in case anybody's watching the video on this, you can see this extra piece of equipment you don't normally see, the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, on which we're doing the simulcast. We got Radio Ragnar up. And strangely enough, I'm not seeing any action. Last week we had folks listening to the show, and we talked quite a bit about life on Earth, which is the topic of the show. Strangely enough, everybody's on Facebook and YouTube. I don't see anybody on... Anyway,
they'll come out.
The club is Radio Ragnar. Now, this is one for the objectivists out there, or at least folks who've read Atlas Shrugged. You know who Ragnar is. You've probably heard of the concept of pirate radio, especially in England, where the British Broadcasting Corporation took over all of that stuff. Getting a license to broadcast was just about impossible, so they had what were called pirate radio stations, and they would run them from ships out on the water. How can you get away with a pirate radio station? So anyway, there's several meanings to the idea of Radio Ragnar, but that's one of the cuter, more humorous ones. So if you're not already following Radio Ragnar on Clubhouse, you should be.
Yes,
Not only is this show on every Wednesday night at 7 until the UK changes time again, and then we go to 8 o'clock. They're on British summertime. Their version of daylight saving time. Why they couldn't coordinate that with us is probably our fault, because we changed a few years ago. Anyway, if you're in the UK, midnight every Wednesday night. If you're in the States, we've got a couple of folks who did join. See, now they just made a liar out of me. But Well, we still have more people, though, Facebook and YouTube. Anyway, point is, Clubhouse show. This show, Life on Earth, every Wednesday night, 7 o'clock. And 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir is normally Sunday night. Well, you know what happened there. At least if you're on Twitter or Facebook or any of the social networks where I shared the gory details of my incredibly bad bicycle accident on Sunday morning.
So
Easter
gory.
morning. 10 miles into the ride. 10 miles away from home, and I came up on a sidewalk, and it was a really clear sidewalk, a very bright morning, beautiful, sunshiny. And unfortunately, I'm listening to Clubhouse. I'm using this same app to listen to a show, looking down at my phone. I look up and I don't see anything. The reason I didn't see anything is because the only thing to see was the shadow of a telephone pole on the sidewalk. And it turned out that it wasn't a shadow. And if I'd been paying attention, I would have noticed that's not the shadow of a telephone pole. That's a telephone pole, and I probably shouldn't run into it at 15 miles an hour on a bicycle.
And the telephone pole that was across the sidewalk was not made out of Tootsie Rolls.
This is true. So, long story short, 4.5 hours in a hospital to put my finger back where it belonged. All is well now. Those of you who are watching the 5 minutes version, in other words, the video, can see my hand's still a little black and blue. And
Thankfully, Robert has wires in all of his fingers, so they just kind of do that whole Gumby thing, and then they just have to straighten it back out.
well, we kind of all do. It's the strange... Finger joints aren't really joints. They're more like, the bones kind of rest against each other.
Right.
And the tendons just hold everything in place.
We're
Fingers are
like,
weird. I don't know if that's a very intelligent design.
We're like floating skeletons encased in meat.
That's right. Floating skeleton. Well, okay, yes. Did you know there's a full-size skeleton in your body right now?
Did you
There's
know?
a skull in your face. Now, this isn't the Halloween episode. We got to cut that out.
It's always Halloween.
It is always, especially for Amy. That's why we usually tell you how many days there will be until Halloween. So, we did wish a happy birthday to Francis Ford Coppola. Happy birthday to Ravi Shankar. Finally, it is National Beer Day, which is why I'm not drinking coffee tonight. You usually see me with a big mug of coffee and get to hear the slurpy noises on the microphone because we have a very expensive and super sensitive microphone. We should be doing AMSR videos. We could be making a video of us whispering to the audience. And that would be totally hot. But we're not going to do that tonight.
Totally
Instead, I'm going
hot.
to drink this beer for National Beer Day. What are we listening to this week? We don't do this on Clubhouse. We do this on 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. But every week, we say, what are we listening to? And it's usually something you should be listening to. Yes.
My first reaction was there's a couple of really great songs by Iron Maiden that I've been listening to.
You are an Iron Maiden fan.
I am.
You are. If
There's
anybody has
great-
not yet seen the Iron Maiden film, Flight 666.
Oh my
Oh, you've got to see
God,
it. I'm not
it's
even an
so
Iron Maiden
good.
fan, but you've got to see Flight 666.
Yes.
It's great.
Right now, my favorite Iron Maiden song is Heaven Can Wait. And there's also The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, which I really love too.
Those apparently are song titles, right?
Yes, they
That
are.
tells you how much I know about Iron Maiden. What I'm listening to, I've been listening to too much Clubhouse.
Yes,
In fact,
you have.
the morning that I rolled over my bicycle and landed on my left shoulder, I was listening to a program called What's Your Why? Now, we've talked about purpose on this show and Ayn Rand's conception of purpose as one of the 3 primary values in life. So it's been interesting following people who aren't as philosophical on what's their why, and people are getting on and talking about what's their why. And part of what they talked about led to the topic of tonight's show. Because the other thing that made me go back and listen to was 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir, the May 31st show that we did on choice, in which we discussed free will and talked about why Sam Harris doesn't know his, why he's mistaken. I'm gonna say it politely, more politely tonight than I did when we did that show. So we did that interesting episode on choice before I ran, and which I was thinking about before I ran into the telephone pole. The common denominator that came out of our old podcast and listening to these Clubhouse shows, the common denominator that kept popping out for me were 3 concepts.
Yes.
Focus, attitude,
Okay.
and gratitude,
Yes.
which I usually call appreciation because I hate rhyming attitude and gratitude. It's a little too quiche for me.
I like it.
Focus, attitude, and gratitude. So, when I talk about focus, I want to go back to Ayn Rand. I want to go back to her definition. I want to speak with some degree of clarity before I go off in my usual 20 directions. So I'm going to quote the objectivist ethics in The Virtue of Selfishness. Mm-hmm. In any hour and issue of his life, man is free to think or to evade that effort. Mm-hmm. Thinking requires a state of full, focused awareness. The act of focusing one's consciousness is volitional. Man can focus his mind to a full, active, purposefully directed awareness of reality. Or he can unfocus it and let himself drift in a semi-conscious daze, merely reacting to any chance stimulus of the immediate moment at the mercy of his undirected sensory perceptual mechanism and of any random associational connections it might happen to make. When a man unfocuses his mind, he may be said to be conscious in a subhuman sense of the word, since he experiences sensations and perceptions. But in the sense of the word applicable to man, in the sense of a consciousness which is aware of reality and able to deal with it, a consciousness able to direct the actions and provide for the survival of a human being, an unfocused mind is not conscious. Mm. Psychologically, the choice to think or not is the choice to focus or not. Mm-hmm. Existentially, the choice to focus or not is the choice to be conscious or not.
Okay. I like that. Mm-hmm.
Metaphysically, the choice to be conscious or not is the choice of life or death. Unquote.
Can I ask you a question? What's the difference between existentially and metaphysically? Huh? What's the answer to that?
Well, it's I take it as being in practice,
right,
versus in essentials. Existentially, the choice to focus or not is the choice to be conscious or not. Mm-hmm. If you're completely out of focus, if you're drinking too many of these Heinekens here.
Here, let me hold your beer.
Hold that for me, please. Hold my beer. If I say hold my beer, I have to think of something really interesting to happen next rather than just rereading this. But yes, existentially, the choice to focus or not is the choice to be conscious or not. Metaphysically, the choice to be conscious or not is the choice of life or death.
Yes.
You're right. We could spend a whole show just on that paragraph.
Yes. Parse that out.
But...
before you go on, I'd like to remind everybody on Clubhouse that we are being recorded. So,
that's right. I'm so glad you said that.
Yes.
We're doing a simulcast.
Yes.
We're simulcasting
Doublecast,
5 Minutes with
triplecast.
Robert Nasir and Life on Earth with Robert and Amy Nasir. So consequently, sort of as a result, this is going to be recorded. Yes. And we do welcome people to come on stage. The Wednesday night show is a conversation, so by all means, raise your hand. We'll bring you up on stage right away. And as Amy says, you will also end up, as a result, being on the 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir podcast.
This is a magic cast.
It is a magic cat. What is a magic cast?
I don't know.
Sounded good. And I'm the one drinking. Go figure.
Well, when there are people drinking around me, I kind of like insert myself, and I just, I start being more of myself, which is kind of wild and crazy anyway.
You're picking up the looseness that is. I've hardly gotten into this bottle.
Right.
I think it's more the scent that reminds you of party times.
Yeah, on Facebook here, Jim wants to see me drunk, and I'm like, no, actually, I'm much more crazier and more able to be crazy when I'm sober, and when I'm drunk, we are
very outrageous sober.
Yeah, I've never.
It's one of the reasons I'm not a drinker is because I don't need to drink to get
alcohol makes
loosen
me
up
sleepy.
Or silly.
It makes me sleepy and dehydrated.
Yeah, that's true. You get
it's
so
sleepy. Fun.
I get a little more outrageous, but I'm already pretty outrageous. So yeah, but I do like the taste of it.
Yeah.
I'll actually drink non-alcoholic beer.
He will.
I'll also drink decaf coffee, and people are like, why do you pay good money for decaf coffee? Because I like coffee. If I just wanted caffeine, there's a little white pill. You can get a bottle of them for like $2. So then I can go right back to them and say, why do you spend money on coffee? Take a pill. Anyway, I don't want to get on a rant about that because what we're talking about is volition and focus and what you have control over. And the reason I come to volition is, again, right away that took me back to last March's podcast. Link to that is in the show notes. Oh, wait, if you're on Clubhouse, there are no show notes. But if you go to the 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir video, if you go to youtube.com/Robert Nasir, Facebook.com/Robert Nasir, there will be show notes within 10 minutes after this episode. It's really interesting going back and forth between the Life on Earth format and the 5 minutes format. We will get it all in, and you'll take it and like it. So,
and hey, if you wanna just chime in and talk with us, please do.
By all means, raise your hand and keep those chats coming.
We'll just use your first name so that you'll be completely anonymous.
Yes, I'm sure we will remember to do that. So when we did our episode on choice, the word of the day was volition. And we posted a link to Leonard Peikoff's outstanding lecture, Volition as a Means to Clarity, in which he talked about thought as integration and integration as hierarchy. And according to Leonard Peikoff, volition means selected from two or more alternatives that were possible under the circumstances. The difference being made by the individual's decision, which could have been otherwise. Now that's interesting, and Harry Binswanger explains it in similar fashion. And there's a bit of a challenge there in that is volition the choice to focus or not, or is it the choice what to focus on? And in practice, those two choices come at you at the same time.
They do.
Reality is giving you all of these things to focus on, and you are choosing to focus when a given thing is at your attention.
Unless you
Is that different? Is that a binary thing? You're either in focus or you're not? Or is it context sensitive in that you choose which thing to focus? And the short answer is both.
I was going to say, unless you were sensory deprived and in a box with no light.
And all you could choose is turn the light on?
No. All you could do is to focus, but since you wouldn't be able to see anything or hear anything, and you'd just be in complete darkness, like sensory deprivation, eventually you'll kind of go mad because you won't have that relationship to reality, and you won't be able to engage your senses like you normally do. What do you think, huh?
I don't know. But I'll bet everybody else out there does. You know, I've discovered an interesting thing, which is occasionally during the 5 minute show, I don't know if this happens during Clubhouse, I tend to do most of the talking on the Clubhouse show.
Yes, you do.
But occasionally I will go back and listen to something that you said, Amy, and listening to it afterward, I realized it was much more brilliant than I realized at the time.
Oh, thank you.
And
after all, I am just a floating skeleton in a package of meat.
well, aren't we all, though? In that episode, we discussed Sam Harris's article, Free Will and the Reality of Love. And he had this bizarre concept that you can love people even if you don't have free will. But you can't hate people without free will. And the reason is, to hate somebody, you have to believe they could have done otherwise. It's so weird.
That's really a strange...
Yeah, he said, a quick excerpt, he said, what many people seem to be missing is the positive side of these truths, his premise of determinism. Seeing through the illusion of free will does not undercut the reality of love, for example, because loving other people is not a matter of fixating on the underlying causes. Rather, it's a matter of caring about them as people and enjoying their company. We want those we love to be happy. We want to feel that way when we're in their presence. And then he says hatred is powerfully governed by the illusion that those we hate could and should have behaved differently. And I went on in that episode to rail against this. It's the worst kind of Jim Taggart, love me, but don't love me for anything. Don't love me as if, I could have or should have been better or worse. It's the most bizarre thing. I
mean, that just completely cuts off that whole spiritual trade if you do that. I mean, that's just... and then it also cuts out the whole idea of, or the potentiality of a friendship in terms of bringing out the best in your friends, which is an extremely great value.
It's the whole idea of, would somebody be flattered if you said, I love you, not for any choices that you've made, not for what you've chosen to make of yourself, but just how you happened to turn out?
Yeah.
Oh, wouldn't that be flattering? Put up your hand raise your hand if you're in for that.
No, thank you.
Yeah, we talked about where is free will, what's the difference between focus and focus on something. And then we quoted Ayn Rand, where she said, and this is John Gall speaking, that which you call your soul or spirit is your consciousness, and that which you call free will is your mind's freedom to think or not, the only will you have, your only freedom, the choice that controls all the choices you make and determines your life and character. Mm-hmm. Sound of rustling notes.
ASMR.
See, the reason I ask where free will is because we all too often think of choice in terms of effects. But complex effects like, shall I go to Paris? Or shall I go to work every day?
Yes.
Can be understood as the sum of three things. Your physical state, your psychological state, and your choices. In other words, what you are, what you've been through, and what you choose to do about it. Determinists always talk about nature and nurture. You've got your nature, you're born with certain dispositions, as well as your physical body and capabilities, and then you've got your nurture, how you were brought up, but also what you've been through. And they always leave out that third one, which is, you are what you are, you've been through what you've been through, and what have you chosen to do about all that? And yet it's hard to imagine anybody not introspecting for the shortest amount of time and saying, yeah, what have I chosen to do about that? And the reason why my bicycle ride, my ill-fated bicycle ride on Easter morning brought me back to this episode of our show, which again will be linked to in our show notes, is that I kept coming back to, well, what do we have control over in the moment?
Yes.
You know, we have control over complex choices in just that manner. We confront them, and because we're conceptual, because we can get beyond what we're experiencing and even choosing in this moment, and extending that out to the longest term projects and the broadest, largest scale projects, we can use choice in that manner to make choices about extremely complicated things. But what hit me in the moment when people were talking about what's your why, where those things you have immediate control over, that you have control over right now in this moment. And the first and obvious one was focus. And it's not just your choice to focus or not, to evade or not, to be evasive, to be bad, to be evil.
What does it mean to focus, though? I mean, because I'm thinking in terms of it's engaging your senses. It's acknowledging that your senses are turned on and opening your eyes a little wider, listening a little bit harder, focusing on those sorts of things.
Yes, and you experience that as a choice, to engage or not, to focus or not, to evade or not.
Right.
For example, in my notes to the previous show I wrote, if no one had the faculty of volition, if no one could have chosen other than that which he had chosen, then seeing sheep-like behavior would merit nothing more than a dispassionate, oh, this is a thing that happened. Our emotional mechanism, all of our passions and evaluations would be limited to the level of our pets.
Yes.
We would not be living, we would be happening. So you ask, well, what does focus look like? What focus looks like is any time you choose to do more than simply passively observe and accept what's happening to you. And again, in any given moment, you have that power. And it doesn't just express itself as you say you're in a box and all you can do is turn on the light or not. All you can do is focus or not. Because again, that choice to focus has content. You are surrounded by the evidence of your senses coming in and all of your knowledge. That's the important stuff, your conceptual knowledge, your memories and your goals and your aspirations and all of the things you know about that and all of the things you can do with that.
I just want to remind everybody on Clubhouse that we are at the half-hour mark. If you'd like to go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to say something. We are recording today, so
Yes.
So this is a little bit different. We are multicasting, multi-magic casting.
Well, we're getting up to speed on Clubhouse too, so we could do a room reset. Do you know what a room reset is?
Not yet.
A room
Please
reset
tell
is
me.
basically what you just did, which is you take a moment, you reset the room by telling everybody, what the heck are we doing here today? Our Clubhouse show, Life on Earth, is a 1 hour-ish conversation with you from the perspective of the philosophy of Ayn Rand, but also the philosophy of me and the philosophy of you, including why the fact that values are primary and objectivism is a philosophy for living on Earth means that objectivists can and should be the most benevolent, optimistic, successful, cheerful, hopeful, gracious, positive people on Earth. So, that's what this room is about. We're glad you've joined us. You are welcome to speak up and talk as well. Although, as Amy said, we're simulcasting with 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir, our usual Sunday night, 6 p.m. Eastern podcast. So realize that you will be recorded. This is your chance at stardom.
Yes.
Well, some of the people in the room are already stars, but if you're not already a star, or if you want to expand your stardom to the Robert Nasir, Amy Nasir universe,
This is your chance for immortality, folks.
this is your chance for that.
And you don't have to say anything intelligent either. You can just say hello or I disagree. Or however.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
So-
So what else you got there, Robert?
So the point is, in any given moment, you choose not just whether to focus, but what you focus on. It's a premise of the objectivist philosophy, and not just that, but cognitive behavioral therapy as well, that the emotions that you experience are the product of certain types of thoughts and values. And you can figure out what is the recipe. We did a whole episode on recipes. We'll do that again. What is
yes.
the recipe? What is it that gives rise to fear? What is the recipe for anxiety? What is the recipe for anger? Love, the emotional response to values. Fear, the feeling that you may lose a value, that your values are under threat. Anger, the response to injustice. There is a recipe for these things. It's a wonderful thing. And so if you know your values are rational, this gets back to, let me just say this. If you know your values are rational, even if you haven't fully validated them, or can't defend them against charges that they're unworthy or low, do not ever give them up.
Okay.
Nor apologize for them, nor bow to pressure from others to renounce them. Do you remember where we got that from?
Yes.
This is the copper pot story.
Yes.
It's one of the best stories in objectivism was when Marianne Suarez talked to Ayn Rand over lunch one day, and we've got a raised hand here. I'll make sure we extend that out. And Marianne Suarez told the copper pot story. She had lunch with Ayn Rand one day. She went to her with some concerns. It turns out that she was getting some flack from other objectivists. And they were criticizing her for having non-philosophical values.
Right.
And the specific example was she had a copper pot that she would polish regularly in her kitchen because she liked it. It was beautiful.
Yes.
And she liked that neat appearance. And she told Ayn Rand about it. And Ayn Rand answered back to her that if that was a value to her, that she should not let others make her feel bad about it.
Right.
And she even said, she didn't have that same value Ayn Rand did. She kept a housekeeper. She didn't enjoy cleaning house.
Yes.
But she understood why Marianne Suarez took pleasure in that. But the bigger point was she said, even if you can't fully validate that value,
Yes.
don't ever let other people take that away from you.
Absolutely.
There's a kind of objectivist, usually the kind of young and overeager, who will drop his values. I've seen this. I've done some of this. They will drop their favorite music, their favorite authors, their personal style or dress or manner, and dye their hair orange and decide to be an architect.
They'll stop listening to Iron Maiden.
And it's
Terrible.
it's stories like the copper pot story that help remind us that values are primary, that our goal is a life that is an end unto itself. Now, I see that we've got the art goddess in the room on Clubhouse. How are you doing tonight?
Yay! Let us worship you.
I'm well. Cheers. I'm just about to start my own personal happy hour here
Oh, great.
Oh,
in
wonderful.
Johnson, Wyoming. And you had to know you weren't going to keep me quiet for too long.
Good.
No, I wanted to pipe in on focus and attitude because I think Quint and I, we proved that this year, over these last 12 months.
Oh my goodness gracious.
We're able to inspire a lot of other people to do so during the pandemic, and a lot of other businesses to stand up and focus and channel their attitude into living and doing what they needed to do. So I really appreciated the topic tonight.
Oh, wonderful. For anybody who doesn't know, and I'm sure you won't mind the publicity, even though Clubhouse is usually a little more anonymous, Quint and Linda Cordair of Cordair.com, Quint Cordair Fine Art, the art gallery, as well as the online experience, and now the second location in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Because, yes, we're a little crazy.
They got shut down like everybody else by this pandemic. And you might remember a little bit into it, some of the restaurants were allowed to open for carry-out. Under all these limitations, a few businesses were allowed to keep, basically, the government, the powers that be decided who was essential and who couldn't open back up. And Linda obviously could tell the story better than me, but her and Quint decided at one point they'd had enough, that their business is as essential, and I would say more essential than most of them out there, and it wasn't even a question of that, because who has the right to decide what is essential, what is important, who should be able to earn a living? And they opened back up, and there was some real pushback on that. There was some back and forth. They were forced to close for a little while longer, and it's a very interesting story, and you can search for or online news stories about it.
Interesting note on that, Robert. We weren't actually forced to close again. We chose to close for 4 days while we regrouped with council.
Well, but I understood there was some threat involved that, yes, was not.
We could have stayed open, but we might also have landed in jail. So we decided to take those 4 days, although that's certainly not what was reported by the media, and regroup and come back swinging. And we did, and several other businesses followed us, including Elon Musk. So there you go.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad he got a good example from somebody, because that boy's a little strange.
Well, it's always a pleasure to see and hear you and Amy, and a little something special is headed your way. Went to the post office today. So.
Oh, goodness
Thank you
gracious.
so much.
Thank you, Art Goddess. We shall
You're
continue
welcome.
worshiping you.
If anybody thinks it's hyperbolic that Linda Cordair's screen name on Clubhouse is Art Goddess, you haven't been listening to her enough, or you haven't gone to Cordair.com.
Yes.
Go to Cordair.com and you will know why the woman who runs this outstanding establishment is the Art Goddess.
I wish I could remember who started that, and some days thank them. It just stuck. Whoever started it, if you're listening, thank you. It's become very endearing, and while initially I was a bit embarrassed by it, now I enjoy it and I embrace it.
Yeah, I can imagine that it might have happened at one of the Ocons, especially the 2019 one. The gallery that you brought, that you managed to reproduce a small piece of Quint Cordair fine art in a room at the convention hotel was just extraordinary.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Yes,
Well,
and
I will go back to listening, but I will leave you with this. And you were talking about choices earlier.
Yes.
We deal with that every day. People making choices of what they value, and sometimes taking flack for someone else not liking the art that they value.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? We say, too bad for the people who don't like what you like.
right.
You just keep it out there. So if it's a copper pot, it's a beautiful painting or a sculpture, and it brings you happiness, then go for it.
So wonderful.
Love it, Linda.
Thanks you. Okay, you mute me now so I don't keep talking.
Hugs to you, Linda.
Oh, it is? Okay, hang on. Can I do that? Nope.
You can mute yourself. There you go.
There you go.
And we'll keep you up on the stage in
And-
case you decide to chime in again.
and
Anybody else who wants to raise their hand, feel free to come up.
I'm going to raise my hand for Holly, because she put a little lovely story in the Facebook chat here.
What did she write?
She says, "It's a lovely story, The Copper Pot." And this is her copper pot story. She said, "I stopped drawing for a while because I had a roommate that would interrupt every time I was drawing Instead of stopping the interruptions, I stopped drawing. Wrong choice. Glad I started up again and figured out my values.
Well, hooray for that. I like a story with a happy ending.
I love it. And I love the fact that I'm actually drawing and painting
And,
simultaneously with Holly because
and you know, even, you know, as well as any of us, how hard that is.
It's really hard
to pick it back up again. So kudos, Holly. Kudos, Amy.
Thank you. And we actually have our friend Ginger joining us in the experiment as well. So
wonderful.
We shall see what
it could be a movement.
Beauty will come of this, and I'm sure there will be lots of it.
Yes. So focus is a choice, and when you realize that focus extends to what to focus on, you realize the magnitude of that choice because life isn't happening to you. Mm-hmm. You don't need to be, in fact, you shouldn't be at the effect.
Wait, how do you mean?
Well, think of your determinists out there, and there's so many. It's not just Sam Harris. It's the premise of so many people who believe that life is something that happens to you.
Right.
If you're unhappy, it's because unhappy things have happened to you. If you're angry, well, things made me angry. If you're overwhelmed, life has overwhelmed me. And all of those things are true. And I would not want to pick on anybody who's finding themselves angry or overwhelmed or sad. There may be compelling reasons for that. But ultimately, at some point, you decide to put the brakes on that and say, no, I'm going to pick the reins back up. Mm-hmm. You know, the solution is always to hold, well, the solution is to solve the problems, but in the moment, the solution is to hold the reins.
Yeah.
When you wake up in the morning, grab the reins. And if you drop them, pick them back up. You know, we've often mentioned the quote, problem isn't the falling down.
It's the staying down.
It's the staying down. It's
yes.
the not getting back up. So, on 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir, but not on Clubhouse, on 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir, we always end every episode with a Post-it note. And this is a Post-it note. I write one of these up once a week that I put on my bathroom mirror.
Yes, you do. I go downstairs. We have a half bath down there, and
yep.
I look at Robert's mirror. I'm like, there are Post-it notes here.
Yeah, sometimes they end up on my computer monitor, wherever it is that I think that particular bit of advice or that aphorism or that affirmation is going to do me the most good in the week coming up.
Oh, we have a question from John. John the Corrector.
He's not the corrector. Is he correcting us? Remember, he doesn't use that name if he's not correcting us.
I'm sorry. Okay. The sometimes corrector, but not correcting right now. Exactly. He's asking a question, which is, so what does at the effect mean?
At the effect means being passive.
Got it.
There are two alternatives to focusing, either drift or evasion. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting conversation to figure out, well, isn't somebody who's drifting evading, or isn't somebody who's evading drifting? But there is a distinction there. Ayn Rand makes the distinction, and I think there's value in it. So being at the effect is essentially allowing yourself to become what the determinists claim you are. An effect, a cause and effect, a mechanistic cause and effect, a billiard ball being buffeted around by the last guy who yelled at you, the last car that cut you off, the last ache that you got after a bad meal, the last thing that happened to you that made you say, well, I would be happy right now, or I would be productive right now, or I'd have a better attitude, or I would be more rational, but cause, and I'm just in effect.
Right, I see. At the effect.
Yeah, I think I picked up that expression, at the effect, from one of these life coach types.
Sure.
And but that's all I mean by that, is allowing yourself to be an effect of some external cause that's not within your control, that you're not using your power of focus to intercept and to actually decide, oh, am I going to be angry about this? Am I going to be sad about this? Am I going to be disappointed about this?
Right.
And the point that I didn't get too much into, because we're keeping it casual tonight, but the point is, your focus is your ability to determine your emotions.
Yes.
Emotions are automatic, subconscious reactions to the values in your life, to things that happen to you and what you think about them.
Yes.
But what you can change is what you're thinking about in any given moment.
You can to an extent.
Yes, you can.
You can give yourself time to process. Usually when something bad happens, like there were a number of things that happened the last couple of days that were bad. Not, through any of my fault or anything like that. I could have changed those if that were, but things were kind of outside of my control. And there was, a good 45 minutes there where I thought, I am just going to accept the fact that I feel bad, and then I will work my way out of it, and gradually focus on something more positive, and that's what I did.
Good.
So, hooray!
Yep. And I kind of mentioned this before, but I'm going to say it again. I'm not holding it against anybody who finds themselves overwhelmed,
right,
or angry, or frustrated, or anxious. Again, emotions can't be changed directly, and to the extent you can change them by changing your focus, that's not always the right thing to do.
Right.
Just as you don't want to evade your thoughts, you don't want to repress your own psychology.
That is correct.
But it remains the case that if you know what your emotion is, you know what's causing it, you know you've dealt with it to the extent you can, you know what the future looks like for that particular issue, and all you need to do is change your state of mind, your emotional state, your cognitive state. You have that power by changing your focus. Don't underestimate how in control of your life you are by simply deciding your focus. And other things that you decide just about as directly, which means your attitude and your gratitude.
And I should say also your physical state.
Your physical state,
yeah,
sure.
There was, while I was waiting outside the hospital when Robert's gummy finger was being pulled and stretched by a rope with an elephant at the end, I was sitting there, and I was, pretty shooken up. I was shooken up.
You were shook up.
I was shook
Shaken,
up.
not stirred.
And
well, you were stirred too.
So I sat in my car, and I did my. For those of you who know me through the couch to standing workout, I always start out the exercise with rolling the shoulders back and then forward.
And you did this at the hospital to deal with your reaction?
Rolling the head all around and then the other way. And I do deep breathing while I do this. And I tell you, doing that helps. Oh my God, did it ever help me? It certainly got me back into a better state. Just by changing my physical state, it helped, that whole mind-body integration thing.
Yeah, the mind-body thing.
That whole thing.
Yes.
As one does.
Yes. Did you know, incidentally, that this is my fourth finger? When you go to the hospital, and this is my ring finger for those of you who aren't watching this on video.
2, 3, 4.
Your fourth finger is your ring finger, and you have your fifth finger is your baby finger, your pinky.
And it's not your second finger. They start with the thumb, which is not really a finger. Thing.
So, since I mentioned it but never got around to showing it, my Post-it note for the week, the Post-it note that will be on I'll probably put this one on my computer monitor, says break the chain. Choose. Break the chain, choose. I swear there are so many people out there who are, as we discussed with John a moment ago, at the effect, who just take their own state, their state of mind, their emotional state as the effect of everything happening around them.
Yes.
And this guy made me angry, and that girl made me sad, and this situation made me anxious, and this over here made me frustrated, and I'll be happy when something comes along that makes me happy.
Oh dear.
It's like a cause and effect chain, a chain of events.
Especially when it's applied to relationships and you start becoming codependent and you start believing that other people are responsible for your feelings.
So what I want to remind myself to do is if I drop the reins, pick them up. If I catch myself in a chain of events, in a cause and effect chain, as if Sam Harris was right and we're all determined and we're not actually choosing anything, we're simply happening. We are things that are happening in the world.
And folks, I can attest to Robert's ability to do this. I picked him up from the street corner where he had his accident, and he was just he was just funny.
You can laugh or you can cry,
Yeah,
you know?
so he chose to laugh.
And the more it hurts, the more you laugh.
And
or the more you cry. Take your pick.
That's often what I do. If I hurt myself physically, I don't cry. I just start laughing hysterically.
I don't think it was too hysterical. Probably less so than drinking this beer here.
You were much more funny after the fentanyl.
Oh, fentanyl. I still don't think it was the drugs.
No, it was.
But Amy is sure that it was. And I was on fentanyl at the time, so she probably knows better than I do.
I totally do.
So my post-it note for the week says break the chain and choose my
chain.
homework every week on 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir, but not on Clubhouse. Clubhouse is so easy.
Yeah.
But every week on 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir, and this is a simulcast with 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir, we have homework, and my homework for the week, and I want you to do this with me if you so choose. See, choose, choice, volition. Did you get that? Focus?
Oh, it ties in so brilliantly.
Your homework. Catch yourself being the effect. Catch yourself feeling at the effect of events, being driven rather than driving, and snap yourself out of it. And try to do this twice. Catch this twice during the week. My method for snapping myself out of it comes from my forthcoming book, Wake Up Twice.
Ooh.
And it's this. Here's the steps. Write these down or just remember them or re-listen to this.
Or do them with me right now.
Or do them with me right now. If you catch yourself feeling like you're not exercising volition, you're simply happening, you're a Sam Harris puppet. Step 1, open your eyes wider. This is the strangest thing. Opening your eyes a little wider changes your state.
This is what Leonard Peikoff does. And I think it's intentional.
Oh, I didn't get this from him, but okay.
No. But his eyes are always like
you mean you see him do it? Yes.
Wide open.
So do this. Take these steps. If you ever catch yourself feeling at the effect of events, open your eyes wider. Raise your chin. Move your head back a little on your neck. Draw your shoulders back. Now just mentally prepare to spring into action. And then depending on your modalities, how you work, these are optional. You can smile, shout out, or clap your hands. And tell me that doesn't change both your state and your sense of control, the degree of your focus. Open your eyes wider, raise your chin, head back in your neck, shoulders drawn back, prepare to spring into action. If I ever catch myself feeling like I am buttressed by the rapids, the water coming down, and I'm just abandoned canoe, these are the steps that I try to remember to take, and this week I'm going to work on that. So if you want to join me, that's your homework for the week, is change your state.
Oh, I got to give a shout out to Narendra, who not only woke up really early.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's
in India.
Yeah.
He just did this with us. So thank you
great.
very much.
If you have different modalities, if you're more physical or different sense-oriented sight, hearing, you can tweak this. One of the great ones, because this is purely psychological, should work for everybody. Imagine for a moment, remember you're trying to change your state. Imagine for a moment that you're late for work.
Uh-oh.
Do you know that feeling of your alarm didn't go off, or you didn't get out of bed, or you fell back asleep? Or imagine you're late for an appointment. And if that doesn't do it, imagine that you're late for an airplane flight to someplace you really want to go.
Oh, that's the worst.
That will shock you out of feeling passive. Shock you out of feeling at the effect of what's going on around you. It's amazing the feeling of self-control that comes when you realize, oh, I'm late for something. Oh, I missed something important. So that's my homework for you this week. Now, does anybody else want to come up on the stage before we start winding down? Normally, at the end of 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir, we would say something like, show notes for this episode will be available online, and it's in the description of the video or on YouTube, within 10 minutes of the end of the show.
Yes.
And we don't post them ahead of time because we don't pre-schedule the shows. That's coming soon, something we're still working on fixing up. Yes. If you want to make suggestions about future episodes, go to the 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir Facebook group. Search Facebook for 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. If you want to support the show, and hey, we should start doing this on Clubhouse too, but usually we talk about this on 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. We have patrons, these awesome people, you know who you are, who give to the show every month. You know, a few dollars, anywhere from a few dollars to, 20, 25, I forget what our highest patron is, but folks have been so cool about that. You could join them by going to patreon.com/Robert Nasir. If you really hate me, just the words /Robert Nasir should excite you. Patreon.com/Robert Nasir. If you'd like to make a one-time contribution to the show, and we have a few people who've done that every few months, and oh my gosh, that's so cool. You can go to paypal.me/Robert Nasir, paypal.me/Robert Nasir to make a one-time contribution to the show. If you want to look at past episodes of 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir, but not Clubhouse, because Clubhouse is ephemeral, whatever ephemeral means. It's out there, but it doesn't last. It only lasts as long as I keep talking, you keep listening, you join us in the room. But if you want to see past episodes of 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir, go to youtube.com/Robert Nasir, and they're all there. Everything we've talked about. Some things we should talk about again because they were so good and we want to develop them further.
Every time you say /Robert Nasir, I'm going to maybe have a giggle fit.
/Robert Nasir. Especially because our good friend James Valiant just posted a post on his Roman Providence group about circumcision. So,
oh, goodness.
/Robert Nasir. Anyway, with that said, you always know when I say with that said that it's almost the end of the show. So we're going to have one last call here for more comments. I know you've been doing a better job reading the comments than I have. What have I missed?
Well, so Chris Land, actually, I'll say his name fully because he just wrote a book.
Chris Land, author of Why Funny is Funny.
That is right. Now on Amazon for yours to purchase.
Officially released on April 1st. Figure.
Kindle and paperback on Amazon.
The Kindle won't be available until June.
Oh, okay.
So he really wants you to buy the Dead Tree version.
Yay, Dead Tree.
So we'll get that because we got to have Chris on the show.
Yeah, again, this is Chris Land, Why Funny is Funny on Amazon right now for you, just for you, specially in paperback form. Why Funny is Funny. Great.
Well, now that we've mentioned it, we should add a link to the show notes.
We will, and it's basically Why Funny is Funny.
Narendra writes, /focus. I like that formulation, and I don't even know why.
I like it. But Chris says, quote, I've felt it all my life. And I think we were talking about, I don't know, was it focus or something like that, perhaps?
No, I'm going to have to re-listen to it. Afterward, it puts timestamps on these, and we can find out who said what when and what we were saying at the time.
Chris says, thanks, guys. Love you both. Probably equally.
Now we can start duking it out. Who can get more fans?
I don't know. Is there such a thing as a scale for spiritual value? You know, I love you equally. Let me measure this out and just only give you equal portions.
Well, you're more charming and 10 times more attractive than I am, but I talk more than you do.
Yes.
So I've got an advantage. I've got an edge there.
Oh, he says the feeling of alarm clock. Yes, I'm sure, especially lately, Chris, you've been feeling the alarm clock and the flight that you're almost missing.
I missed my alarm clock. My book hasn't come out on Kindle yet. Well, just buy the paper version. You can feel it in your hands.
I did tell John that he's going to become a superhero called the Corrector. and you keep focusing on that one little part of what he does. I'm going to illustrate a comic, my own comic. And it's going to feature him wearing a cape, I'm sure.
Whatever it takes to get you to do more art. And everybody got to see your bunny last week.
There's featured in the Corrector comic strip is going to be the art goddess,
Yes.
And also there's going to be another character called the Talking Head with the in front of it, but singular.
So
yes,
as we're winding down and nobody else is coming on the Clubhouse stage, so I think it's about time for us to go get some dinner. Yeah, last call for alcohol. Last call for alcohol here. But Yaron Brook does that a lot, where he gets toward the end of his show and he's like, guys, I got to go get some dinner. And then somebody else super chats him $20 and he answers another question. That's what we need. We need super chat. We need people to ask us questions that they would... Oh, John acknowledged his superpower is correcting. Okay.
Yes, on Facebook, someone asked what his superpower was.
Yes.
He would say correcting, of course.
So I think what I need to do is, if people want to, say I don't have Super Chat. Apparently you have to be a rock star to get Super Chat to work on Facebook. Even on the Ayn Rand Center UK ones today, it wasn't working. And I'm like, I want to throw money at them, but it wouldn't work. So maybe I just need to up my membership to a higher rank that costs more money. But point is, we're not going to have Super Chat anytime soon. So, we could have people, if you tell me you're going to paypal.me/Robert Nasir, $5 or $20 or something, then you could ask a question, and no matter what, I'll answer it.
Yes. So go to PayPal.
Can you imagine that? If people would actually say, I want to ask Robert Nasir this question I've got.
Yeah. Oh, I think that would be really great. I think a lot of people would go for it.
I can't imagine.
But if you want to see more of us and see super chats and all sorts of superpowers and all sorts of things like that, then please go to YouTube and share that YouTube link out to all of your friends and family and spam them on Messenger, please. And, that's how it all works,
right? Spam your friends.
Spam
Are you sure you're not the one who's drinking tonight?
I'm only this way because you are.
But I need one beer. Of course, I'm a lightweight. I can feel it. That's what I get for not drinking. Where was I? Oh, that's right. We've already done most of the usual ending stuff. We don't really have a formal ending for the Life on Earth show. So the way that we would end 5 minutes with Robert Nasir, in fact, this is 5 minutes with Robert Nasir, 2. Mm-hmm. So the way that we do end 5 minutes with Robert Nasir is to remember that y'all are out there. And that is one of the most important things in our lives, is to do this show and to know that people are getting something out of it. So I would like to just wish each of you, as always, we wish you success. Mm-hmm. We wish you flourishing. We wish you focus, attention, attitude, gratitude. See, I use the rhyming version that you like.
I love it. Thank you.
You do love it. And that's good, because as always, as much as ever, and maybe a little extra because we're well lubricated, we wish you love.